Praise to Jesus and Mary.
Now and forever.
Several years ago, I think it was the year 2009, a collection of Mother Teresa's private letters to her spiritual director were published and entitled, "Come Be My Light." It was a part of Mother Teresa that, up to that point, the world has never known of, because in the letters, she expressed her interior struggles, her interior darkness, what St. John of the Cross calls the dark night of the soul. And when that book was published, well-known atheist Christopher Hitchens pounced at that occasion to continue his virulent attacks on Mother Teresa, trying to discredit her, accusing her of being false and phony. St. John Paul II, on the other hand, several years earlier, when he heard of these letters of Mother Teresa, did the exact opposite. He put her on the fast track to sainthood, waved off the necessary years of waiting to open up a cause, and immediately opened her cause for beatification. This is a classic example of what St. Paul talks about in today's first letter, when he says, "Now the natural man does not accept what pertains to the Spirit of God, for to him it is foolishness, and he cannot understand it, because it is judged spiritually. The one who is spiritual, however, can judge everything." The natural man, in the Greek it's psychikos, which literally means the person who relies exclusively on his natural faculties of will, of his mind, and that is not sufficient to understand the things of God. The spiritual man, that St. Paul talks about, is the Christian in the state of grace, who participates in the divine nature through grace, and hence his soul and his faculties are elevated into the supernatural order, and his faculties, with the help of grace, is able to perceive the things of God and his operation more readily. The spiritual, however, can judge everything. To put on the mind of Christ, as St. Paul tells us in his first letter, we have to draw from the riches of those spiritual men and women who have preceded us. And one of the ways to do that is to be faithful to our spiritual reading. Along with the sacred scripture and the catechism of the Catholic Church, the Church offers us an abundance, a wealth of writings from the saints and the lives of the saints. We will never get through all of them in one lifetime. That's why when it comes to spiritual reading, it's good to consider two things. The first one is choose wisely. Again, there is so many good spiritual literature out there. Choose the best. And the best is those books, those spiritual books that contain spiritual food, spiritual solid food that nourishes your soul. Remember, not every soul is the same. Some may love The Story of a Soul by St. Theresa. Others might prefer St. Francis de Sales' Introduction to the Devout Life. Some may love the Diary of St. Faustina. Others may prefer St. Ignatius of Loyola's Spiritual Exercises. Some may prefer St. John of the Cross over St. Theresa of Avila, and so on and so forth. Choose the best spiritual nourishment for your soul. There's certain spiritual works that nourish our souls at a certain stage in our spiritual life. The best books are those that we can continually go back to again and again, regardless of what stage we are at. We always find those new insights and enlightenment. Here's a second consideration. Read accordingly. We have to do spiritual reading in the proper spirit, in the spirit of faith. It's not an academic textbook. We read accordingly, spirit of faith and love. So certain times we would have to pause, raise our minds and our hearts to God. And when that happens, when we read, pause, raise our minds to God, prayer becomes very easy. We'll no longer recognize when we're reading and when we're praying because they harmonize. Be faithful to spiritual reading, and there are so many treasures out there, and there is something for everyone. Let us discover those treasures that the Church offers us. St. John Paul II loved to read St. John of the Cross. And in his own book, Gift and Mystery, on which he wrote in anniversary of his priesthood, he admits and confesses that there was one book in particular that was a turning point, he says, turning point in his life. That book was titled True Devotion to Mary. When he discovered that spiritual treasure written by Saint Louis Grignon de Montfort, he said it completely transformed his life and opened his relationship and with Our Lady in ways that he could never imagine. And in fact, his papal motto, Totus Tuus, comes from Saint Louis Grignon de Montfort's book. So let's be faithful to our spiritual reading, choosing wisely those spiritual works that nourish our own souls, and read accordingly, spirit of faith and love, entrusting ourselves in a very special way to the Blessed Mother. May we be all hers as well, totus tuus, totally yours. This is the way we put in the mind of Christ, put on the mind of Christ, as St. Paul writes in his letter. Praise be Jesus and Mary.